My husband asked me to fly out to Dallas alone for our company's investor summit because he said someone needed to hold down the fort in Houston. He said it with such a straight face, such a reasonable tone, that I actually thanked him for being understanding. I kissed him on the cheek, rolled my carry-on to the door, and told him I would be back Sunday night. That was the plan. But my afternoon panel got canceled, the last session wrapped 2 hours early, and I was on a Southwest flight home by 4 o'clock on Saturday instead of Sunday. I did not call ahead. I figured I would surprise him, maybe order Thai food, watch something mindless on the couch. I had been grinding for 8 months straight and all I wanted was one quiet evening with my husband. What I got instead was a lesson I should have paid for years ago. I pulled into our driveway in Bel Air at 6:30, and his car was there, which was fine, expected even, but there was a second car parked along the curb, a white Audi with a pink fuzzy keychain hanging from the rearview mirror that I could see from the street. I sat in my car for a moment. I am a data person by nature, so I cataloged the information without panicking. White Audi, pink keychain, Saturday evening, husband who told me to travel alone. I walked in through the side door that leads directly into the kitchen, the one that does not beep on the alarm because I had the code disabled after I kept setting it off at 6 in the morning. The lights in the kitchen were low. There was an open bottle of the 2019 Napa Cab I had been saving on the counter, 2 glasses, one with a lipstick print that was very clearly not my shade. I heard music playing from the back of the house. Something soft, something deliberately romantic. I did not yell. I did not run. I stood in my kitchen in my blazer and my rolling suitcase behind me, and I pulled out my phone. I opened the Brex dashboard, the corporate card platform for my company. My husband Derek had a company card under his name as co-founder. It had a $25,000 monthly limit that I had set up 2 years ago when I brought him on. I went to his profile. I pressed suspend account. The app asked me to confirm. I confirmed. Then I opened our joint bank account on a second app and initiated a transfer of every dollar above the household minimum into my personal LLC operating account, an account that existed before our marriage and that he had never once asked to see the inside of. The transfer took 45 seconds. Then I sat down at the kitchen island, poured myself a glass of the wine he had opened with someone else in my house, and I waited. Let me tell you who I am so you understand why what happened next happened the way it did. My name is Maya Williams, born Maya Chen, and at 31 years old I am the founder and CEO of a logistics software company called GridPath that I built from a condo apartment in Midtown Houston with $18,000 in savings and a database I coded myself over. 2 Christmases in a row. I grew up in Sugarland, the daughter of a woman who worked double shifts at a hospital laundry for 20 years to give me the kind of education that would mean I never had to work a double shift. I did not take that lightly. I took every AP class, every scholarship, every internship that was ever offered to me. By 24, I had a computer science degree from UT Austin and a job offer from a firm in the energy sector that I turned down to go build something of my own. GridPath now serves over 300 mid-size logistics companies across the Gulf Coast and Midwest. We have 41 employees, a recurring revenue model, and a Series A round I closed last year for $9 million. I say all of this not to brag, but because you need to understand the context of what my husband thought he was taking when he decided I was too busy to notice. I met Derek at a conference in Austin 4 years ago. He was charming, well-dressed, and had a background in supply chain that seemed like destiny at the time. We dated for a year, married in a small ceremony in Galveston, and I brought him into the company as co-founder 18 months into our marriage because he asked, and because I was in love, and because people in love make decisions that their accountants later look at with quiet, professional sorrow. I heard them before I saw them, a door, a laugh, feet on the hardwood in the hallway, and then she walked into the kitchen first, because she had no idea I was there, and she stopped so fast she grabbed the doorframe. She was young, 23, 24 at most, blonde, wearing one of my husband's flannel shirts that hit her mid-thigh. I recognized her immediately, because she worked for me. Her name was Amber, and she was a marketing coordinator I had personally hired 7 months ago after interviewing her twice and calling her references. I had told Derek she was a strong candidate. Derek walked in behind her and saw me sitting at the island with a glass of his wine, and the color drained from his face so completely it was almost clinical. "Maya," he said, "you are not supposed to be home." "I know," I said. "I can explain," he started. I looked at Amber. Amber looked at the floor. I almost felt sorry for her for a fraction of a second, and then I remembered she had parked her Audi in front of my house on a Saturday night and was wearing my husband's shirt, and the sympathy evaporated. "You should probably go," I said to her. Her eyes stayed down as she backed out of the kitchen. I heard the front door a minute later. Derek tried to reach for my arm across the island. I moved it. "We need to talk about this calmly," he said. He was already in management mode, which is the thing about men who marry women smarter than themselves. They learn to borrow your vocabulary. I nodded. "Okay," I said. "Talk." He launched into it. "She meant nothing. It was a mistake. He had been lonely. I was always working, always traveling, always in my head. He felt invisible. He felt like a supporting character in my story and not a partner." On and on, all the scripts that men rehearse for exactly this moment, and I sat and listened to all of it with my wine and my very steady hands. When he finished, I said, "Your card was just suspended." He frowned. "What?" "Your Brex card," I said. "As of about 12 minutes ago, it no longer works. And the balance in the joint account has been moved. If you try to use your debit card tonight, it will decline." He stared at me. He did a thing with his jaw that I had seen him do in tense board meetings. "Maya, this is not the time to be punitive." "I am not being punitive," I said. "I am being accurate." I picked up my suitcase from where I had left it by the door, rolled it down the hall to the guest room, and locked the door from the inside. I sat on the edge of the bed, and for about 20 minutes I allowed myself to feel everything that needed to be felt. The embarrassment, the waste of it, the specific grief of realizing the person you built something with was quietly hollowing it out from the inside. Then I washed my face, opened my laptop, and sent an email to my attorney. The next few days moved fast. Derek oscillated between apologetic and aggressive in the way that people do when they sense the ground shifting and cannot decide whether to beg or fight. He slept in the master bedroom, which I let him do because I had already called a locksmith to change the passcode on the home office and the server closet where I kept local backups of GridPath's infrastructure. He did not know I had done this until he tried to go in on Monday morning and the panel rejected his code. He appeared in the kitchen doorway while I was making coffee. His voice was controlled but tight. "Maya, the office door code is different." "I know," I said. "You changed it without telling me?" "I changed it," I said simply. He set his jaw again. "I am a co-founder of this company. You cannot just lock me out of a room in our own house." "You are not locked out of the house," I said. "You are locked out of the server room. There is a difference. While we are working through this personally, I have a fiduciary responsibility to 41 employees, and I am not going to leave critical infrastructure accessible to someone whose loyalty I am currently reassessing." He did not have a response to that. He was very good at emotional arguments. He was less good when I spoke in the language of liability. His mother called that evening. Her name was Patricia, and she was a woman who had raised Derek to believe that his fundamental goodness was self-evident and required no maintenance. She was warm to me during the marriage, the way people are warm to someone who is paying for things. She called from Beaumont, and I answered because I believed at the time that a conversation was possible. "Sweetheart," she said, "Derek called me. He told me what happened, and I just want to say, these things are complicated. Marriage is complicated. Men struggle sometimes and they do stupid things, but that does not mean you throw away what you have built together. You are both young. You can work through this." "I am glad he called you," I said. "He is devastated," she said. "He loves you." I thought about the pink keychained Audi parked in front of my house. I thought about the open bottle of wine. The 2 glasses. "Patricia," I said. "Did he tell you her name?" A pause. He mentioned there was a girl. A moment of poor judgment. "She works for me," I said. "I hired her. I interviewed her and I called her references and I brought her into my company. And your son used that access to conduct an affair in my house." Silence. "I understand you love your son," I continued. "I understand you want to protect him, but I need you to understand that the woman you are asking to be forgiving and flexible is the same woman who has been paying the note on the vacation house in Galveston for the past 2 years. Just so we are calibrated." She did not call back that night. A week passed. Then Derek went to a lawyer. I found out about it through an assistant who overheard him on the phone in the backyard. He had hired a family law attorney named Maddox out of Montrose, and from what she caught, he was building a claim for equity in GridPath based on his contributions as co-founder. I was not surprised. I had been waiting for this move the way you wait for a weather system you have been tracking for days. Derek came to me that Friday evening looking composed. He sat down at the kitchen table and folded his hands the way he did in investor meetings when he wanted to appear reasonable, and I noticed the energy in him was different, quieter. He had a plan. I talked to a lawyer, he said. I know, I said. He barely blinked. Then you know what I am going to say. Tell me anyway, I said. He laid it out cleanly. GridPath was founded before the marriage, yes, but the Series A was raised during the marriage. The company's valuation grew significantly during the years we were together. His role as co-founder and his operational contributions during that period had material value. Under Texas community property law, the increase in value of a business during a marriage can, in some circumstances, be subject to division. His lawyer believed they had a case for somewhere between 20 and 30% of the appreciated equity. He paused. I want to be fair, Maya. I am not trying to take your company. I am trying to be compensated for what I put into it. I looked at him for a moment. What did you put into it? I asked. He stiffened. I was co-founder. I ran operations. I was the face of the company at events when you were heads down in product. I nodded. I pulled a folder out from the counter behind me. I had been carrying it around in the kitchen for 3 days, waiting for this exact conversation. I slid it across the table. He opened it. He read the first page. He read the second. His hands went still. The cover document was from my corporate attorney. It was a summary of the GridPath founding structure. The company had been incorporated as a Texas LLC 2 years before I met Derek, capitalized by an irrevocable family trust established by my mother when I was in college with money she had saved over 20 years. Every round of investment went into the trust-held entity. My salary came out of it. My personal equity was held in trust. Derek had been granted a co-founder title and a small operational salary, both of which were documented as employment arrangements, not ownership transfers. The trust documents were clear. No equity had ever been formally transferred to Derek. He had options that had never vested because the vesting cliff required 5 years of continuous employment, and he was at 3.5. He had a title. He did not have ownership. You have a co-founder title, I said. Not a co-founder stake. Those are different things, and they have been different things since day one. I should have made that clearer when you came on. That is on me. He looked up from the papers. You set this up on purpose, he said. My mother set it up when I was 19, I said. She worked at a hospital laundry for 2 decades so that one day no one could take what I built. She called it her Girls' Foundation. I did not set it up against you specifically, Derek. I did not know you when it was created. But yes, it applies to you now. He pushed the folder back across the table. His composure was gone. You trapped me, he said. You let me believe I was building something with you. You were building something, I said. You were building a salary and a title and a lifestyle. That is not nothing. You just did not read the paperwork carefully enough to know what it was. He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. I am going to fight this, he said. Maddox says we have grounds. You can fight it, I said. The trust has 3 corporate litigators on retainer. They handle cases like this frequently. I hope Maddox is good. He left the room. I heard him on the phone in the backyard for an hour. I made dinner for one, ate it standing at the counter, and then called my best friend in Austin to tell her what was happening. She told me to get my hair done, drink something nice, and remember that I had built something real. I took the first 2 pieces of advice. What I had not told Derek, and what I was not yet ready to tell anyone, was that 3 days earlier my CFO had flagged something in our expense reporting that she could not reconcile. Her name was Denise, and she was methodical the way only people who genuinely love numbers can be. She had been with me since year 2. She sent me a message on a Tuesday morning that just said, "Can you call me when you have a private minute? The budget review turned up something I need to walk through with you." I called her from my car. "Maya," she said, and her voice had that particular careful quality it gets when she is about to tell me something I am not going to like. I have been going through the vendor reconciliations for the last 18 months. There are 6 vendor accounts that have been charging us on a monthly basis for services that I cannot match to any active contracts in our system. How much? I said. Total. Over 18 months, she said. $420,000. I gripped the steering wheel. Say that again. She said it again. I pulled into a parking lot. Walk me through what you found. The vendors all have similar naming structures, she said. Regional names, logistics adjacent language, nothing that would stand out in a ledger unless you were looking specifically. They each billed under the threshold that triggers my secondary review protocol, between 11 and 14,000 per month per vendor. 6 vendors, 18 months. He knew your review threshold, I said. She was quiet for a moment. I was afraid to say that out loud. She said. Where does the money go? I asked. She had traced 2 of the accounts to a Delaware shell entity registered 8 months after Derek joined the company. The registered agent address was a UPS store in Galleria. The other accounts she was still working on, but the pattern was consistent. Money in from GridPath, money out within 72 hours to accounts she could not immediately follow. I sat in that parking lot for a long time after we hung up. The affair had been painful in the personal way that betrayals are painful. This was different. This was my employees' livelihoods. This was the money I had raised from investors who trusted me. This was money that should have paid for software development and health benefits and the small bonuses I gave at the end of a good quarter. He had taken it with the patience and the precision of someone who had planned it, someone who had studied the system I built and then quietly put his hand in it. I went back to the office and asked Denise to loop in an external forensic accountant. I had one on a previous engagement, a man named Clifton who had testified in 3 SEC cases and who treated financial fraud the way a surgeon treats a tumor, without sentiment and with complete thoroughness. I asked him to start that week. I asked him to be discreet. I also called my attorney and added 2 words to our conversation. Wire fraud. Clifton delivered his preliminary findings 8 days later. He sat across from me in the conference room with a printed summary and a look I can only describe as professionally sorrowful. The 6 shell companies are controlled through a layered structure, he said. But the beneficial owner on every one of them is the same. A holding entity registered in Nevada last year. That entity is owned by 2 individuals. I waited. Derek Allen Williams, he said. And Amber Nicole Pierce. I put my pen down. She was not just an affair, Clifton said, carefully. Based on the registration timeline and the account structures, she appears to have been involved in setting up the shell entity approximately 2 months before she was hired at GridPath. He applied for the job, I said, almost to myself. He suggested her name. He told me she came highly recommended and that he had met her at an industry meetup. Clifton nodded. The timing aligns with that. I looked at the ceiling. He did not just bring her into our house. He brought her into my company with a plan in place to use her as a financial co-conspirator. He manufactured a reference. He walked her through my interview process. He sat in the kitchen and helped me prep for the final interview with her, making suggestions about what questions I should ask. And the whole time, the architecture for stealing from my company was already in place. Is this federal? I asked. Wire fraud is federal, Clifton said. Because transactions crossed state lines using the Delaware entity and the Nevada holding company, this is FBI jurisdiction. And because you have a Series A from institutional investors, there is an additional layer of securities-adjacent exposure that the Department of Justice takes very seriously. I took a long breath. How long to complete the full report? 72 hours, he said. Then finish it, I said. And Clifton, I want this ironclad. I want every wire transfer documented. I want every date, every amount, every account number. I want a chain of evidence that a first-year agent can follow without asking a single clarifying question. He nodded and gathered his papers. At the door he paused. There is a GridPath board meeting next week, he said. The quarterly review. I believe your husband is presenting the operations update. I know, I said. Clifton looked at me for a moment. I see, he said quietly. He left. I spent the next 3 days being very normal. I went to the office. I attended a vendor call. I had lunch with Denise on Thursday, and we talked about nothing that was not work-related until she looked at me and said, "How are you actually doing?" And I said, "I am almost finished." She understood. Derek moved through the house with the cautious energy of a man who knew a verdict was coming but could not read the jury. He had stopped trying to re-engage me emotionally. He was focused now on the legal strategy, spending evenings on the phone with Maddox, building what he believed was a case for his equity claim. He had no idea the terrain had shifted entirely beneath that case. He was preparing to argue about what percentage of the kitchen he deserved while I was sitting on evidence that the kitchen had been on fire the whole time. The board meeting was held in our downtown office on a Tuesday morning. 9 people in the room, including our 2 lead investors, my CFO, our head of product, and 3 independent board members I had appointed at the series a close. Derek was at the far end of the table with his operations slides loaded on the display. He looked sharp. He always looked sharp. That was one of the things he was genuinely good at. He went through the quarterly numbers, the retention metrics, the infrastructure updates. He was confident, fluent, in his element. I watched him the way I had watched Clifton's report, carefully, completely. When he finished and the room began to ask questions, I let the exchange run for about 10 minutes before I raised my hand. Before we close the operations section, I said, I want to surface something that Denise and I have been working through with our external auditor. I think it is relevant to the board's oversight responsibilities. I pulled up a document on my laptop and mirrored it to the screen. It replaced Derek's slide deck. It was a single-page summary, clean and clear, with 6 vendor names, 18 months of charges, and a total dollar figure in bold at the bottom. The room went quiet. I walked through it with the same tone I use for any operational briefing. Factual, sequential, no editorializing. 6 vendor accounts. $420,000. Shell company structure. Delaware registration. Nevada holding entity. 2 beneficial owners. I did not say the names yet. One of the lead investors, a woman named Sandra who had written the first check into our Series A, leaned forward. Maya, she said, her voice measured. Are you saying this is internal? I am saying the full forensic report will be available to each of you by end of day, I said, and that I have already been in contact with the appropriate federal agencies. I looked down the table at Derek. He had gone the color of old paper. I want to be transparent with this board, I said, still in the same boardroom register. The 2 individuals identified as beneficial owners of the holding entity are our marketing coordinator Amber Pierce, who has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, and my husband Derek Williams, who is also named as co-founder in our operating agreement. The sound that went through the room was not dramatic. It was the sound of professional people recalibrating very fast. Chairs adjusted. Pens were set down. Someone cleared their throat. Derek stood up. He looked at me. His mouth moved, but nothing came out for a moment. Then he said, "This is fabricated. The forensic report has wire transfer records, account registration documents, and entity filings," I said. "It is thorough." "This is a divorce tactic," he said, louder. He looked around the table. "She is doing this because I consulted a lawyer about my equity claim. She is using the company as a weapon." Sandra looked at him with the expression of someone who has sat through a lot of boardrooms and can identify very quickly when someone is managing perception rather than addressing substance. She looked back at me. "When were the FBI contacted?" "Yesterday," I said. "The case has been opened. I expect they will want to interview board members in their individual capacities as part of the due diligence process." Derek's attorney, Maddox, I found out later, had not prepared him for this scenario because Derek had not told Maddox the full picture. He had told Maddox about the equity dispute. He had not mentioned the $420,000. 2 things happened simultaneously in the next 48 hours. Derek's attorney withdrew, and federal agents showed up at our offices with a subpoena for the company's financial records. I handed them Clifton's report bound in a 3-ring binder. The lead agent, a woman named Torres who had the particular focused energy of someone who was very good at her job, shook my hand and said, "This is the cleanest preliminary package I have received in a while." I said, "I believe in documentation." Derek was arrested on a Friday morning at the house in Bel Air. I was not home. I was at the office, running our regular product stand-up when my neighbor sent me a text with 2 words, "They're here." I thanked her and kept running the stand-up. He was charged with wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Amber was arrested the same morning at her apartment in Midtown, charged as a co-conspirator. Her Audi was impounded. The contents of the Delaware entity's accounts were frozen by the federal order. Patricia called me again that afternoon. This time her voice was different. The warmth was gone. What was left was something thin and frightened. "Zora," she said. "She called me the wrong name. I let it pass. You have destroyed my son." "I am the victim of your son's fraud," I said. "What I did was document it and cooperate with federal investigators. Those are different things." "He is going to prison," she said. "That is a decision he made when he started the first wire transfer," I said. "You ruined this family," she said. "Patricia," I said, and I kept my voice level because I was not angry at her the way I had once been angry. I was just tired in the way that comes after a long and necessary process reaches its end. "Your son spent $420,000 that belonged to my employees, my investors, and the company I have been building since I was 24 years old. He brought his co-conspirator into my business under false pretenses. He used my systems and my access controls and my trust to fund a parallel financial life. I did not ruin your family. He made those decisions one wire transfer at a time, and the only thing I did was make sure the evidence was organized enough for the people whose job it is to handle it." She hung up. The divorce was filed 30 days later. Because Derek was federally indicted, the asset division was simplified considerably. A man with pending wire fraud charges and no vested equity and no job and no access to accounts is not a strong negotiating position. Maddox's replacement, a younger attorney who seemed faintly embarrassed to be there, sat across from my legal team and accepted a settlement that amounted to Derek receiving his personal property, his car, and a debt load from the loans he had taken to fund Maddox's retainer. He signed the papers from the county jail where he was awaiting trial. His options in GridPath expired unexercised. I donated the recovered funds, once returned by the federal process, to an employee emergency hardship fund inside the company. I made it permanent. Denise's name is on it because she is the one who found it. I refilled the Series A investor accounts out of my own salary over the following 2 quarters. Sandra told me I was not obligated to do that. I told her I was obligated to do it, just not legally, and that there was a difference. The forensic accountant who found the shell company structure, Clifton, turned out to have a dry sense of humor and an encyclopedic knowledge of Gulf Coast real estate that had absolutely nothing to do with wire fraud. I found this out on a Saturday afternoon in December when he called to close out the final billing on the engagement, and we ended up talking for 2 hours. He said the thing he found most unusual about the case was not the complexity of the shell structure, which he had seen more elaborate versions of, but the fact that the primary target had responded to financial betrayal by immediately and methodically building a case rather than burning the evidence in a panic or going silent from grief. I told him that was my mother's training. She always said that the way you respond to a crisis is the most honest version of yourself you will ever see. She said you want to make sure that version is someone you respect. He asked me if I wanted to get dinner sometime and think about something that was not forensic accounting. I said I would think about it. My phone still gets calls from a restricted number every few weeks. I know it is the collect call system from the federal detention facility. I do not pick up. I have nothing to say to Derek that would be useful for either of us. What I said in the boardroom was the most complete statement I had in me, and I meant it down to the last decimal point. GridPath closed a new partnership last month with a regional carrier network that expands our footprint into the Midwest. We are up to 49 employees. I gave everyone an extra week of PTO at Thanksgiving and a letter telling them what I believe, which is that the company they work for is only as honest as the people who hold its finances, and that I intend to be exactly that honest for as long as I am running it. I have my mother's trust documents framed on the wall of my home office, not in the fancy frame you would put an award in, just a plain black frame, the kind you buy at a drugstore, because she was practical, and she would have wanted it practical. In the bottom corner of the second page, in her handwriting, is a line she added after she had the attorneys draft the original. It says, "For my girl, so no one can take what she earns." She was right about almost everything. If you have ever had to protect what you built from someone who was supposed to protect it with you, leave your city in the comments below. I want to know where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe, because there are a lot more stories where this one came from, And none of them end the way the wrong people expect them to.